Hi, everybody. I'm back, and I'm calling this part four, but I'm kind of shifting focus a little bit. What I want to talk about today is some of the reasons why I feel like these cultures of allowing the abuse of young women are allowed to happen, and why the church, especially here in Wisconsin, has been so slow to react, and to change the way that they operate, in order to protect victims. So, the church that I grew up in was very, people were separated out into almost like classes. So if you were brown or black, you were at a slightly lower level than everyone else, unless you were a minister, which would elevate you. If you were a family that was economically disadvantaged, you would be at a slightly lower level, in part because you weren't able to give as much money as people who were not at that lower level. So there were lots of ways that they divided people up. And so that was part of the problem. There was racism and classism apparent, on all levels of the church culture that I grew up in. You were definitely judged by how you dressed, if you were a woman, what you wore, um, you know, and it's not just whether or not you were covered, it was how fancy are your clothes, how fancy is your hairstyle. All of those things come into play when you're deciding who belongs in what group. And the thing with women is it's really fraught, because if you're too fancy and your hair is too high, then you're trying to draw attention to yourself, and that could be a reason that they would use to blame you if you were abused. But if you're too like dowdy and you don't have the money for the fancy dress, then that's a reason to treat you like you're disposable. So there's a lot there. I think I'm going to try to zero in today on money. Um, I think that one of the reasons that young women are so disposable within some UPC congregations is because they don't pay tithes. So that's not to say that they don't pay tithes on their little babysitting jobs like I did and things like that, but they're not the main tithe payers. The men that are abusing them are the main tithe payers. And those men, you don't want to remove them from the church. You don't want to do anything to make them upset, because they're the ones that are financing the pastor and everything that's going on in the church are the men. These young women, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old young women, are not really contributing that much financially. So it's really easy to just kind of brush them under the rug and dispose of them, or to, label them in negative ways, while continuing to support the men and continuing to elevate them within the ranks of the church. So I think that money plays a pretty big role. I also think that money plays a role in how likely the pastor is to care about whether or not a young woman's parents leave, or if they feel like those parents might have enough clout to be able to get a district superintendent or someone like that to listen. In my case, my pastor was the district superintendent, so there really wasn't anyone in Wisconsin that was higher than him that I could take my issue to. Not that I would have, because I was a child, but if I had been an adult in that situation, there really wouldn't have been anyone. So if you don't have a parent who's prominent enough to really put pressure on the pastor, and you're a young woman and you're not giving a lot of money to the church, your worth and value is going to be so much less than an adult male who's contributing. And I think in the hierarchy, men are valued over women, white men are valued over other men, and men who give money are valued way up here above everyone else. So, that means that someone like me, who grew up really poor, whose parents were not in good standing, and who had a very brown father and who was brown herself, I didn't have a lot going for me. I had a lot going against me from the very beginning. And I think that Steve was really smart in that he chose someone that he knew the church ultimately would be willing to throw, under the bus, and who he knew they didn't really care that much about if I came or stayed or whatever. Like, ultimately, in the end, I was, someone who could be forgotten. And, he was very right, because they really didn't seem to be all that concerned with whether or not I was okay and whether or not they were protecting me from gossip. They didn't seem concerned when I left, like I left and no one came after me. It was a really sad situation, because if they had taken the time to talk to me or had looked past my family standing and past the money that my parents did or did not give to the church, what they would have seen is a child who had a real heart for ministry and had a real heart for God. And, Steve may have destroyed me in some ways. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the church put the final nails in my coffin. And the church could have loved me and nurtured me and cared for me and helped me to heal and retained me as a member and had me as an adult to serve, which is something that I did throughout my entire childhood. But instead, they ignored me, they talked about me, they shunned me, and it isn't just that they talked about me and they shunned me and they ignored me. They are still saying really wretched things about me and still not recognizing that children can't consent. And I feel it's not the morally right thing to do, to talk about children in terms of being loose or slutty or whatever because they're children. And if you had a problem with the way that I was behaving or the way that I was dressing, why then did you allow me to stay in ministry? They were more than happy to use my labor, to use my work as a child, but they didn't feel the need to protect me because my parents weren't the right kind of people and we didn't pay tithes. So therefore I was sort of disposable. And I think that's so sad. And I have seen that with other survivors. I've seen, rather than helping a poor family, they will burden the children in that family. They will make people's burdens, survivors' burdens, and just people that are economically disadvantaged, they will make their burdens heavier, not lighter. And what I mean by that is they will throw responsibility on the backs of children where it doesn't belong. They will put expectations on children that are unreasonable and unfathomable to me now. And they will further humiliate people that don't come from money by telling them that if they just prayed right, gave more money to the church, lived a better life, that God would bless them and that they would have what they needed. So ultimately, it's your fault. It's your fault if you're abused, and it's your fault if you're poor. And therefore, they feel let off the hook for having to be supportive and loving and caring for those victims. So that's part of what creates this atmosphere of, I see this adult man basically grooming a child. Do I say something or do I not say something? Well, are her parents big donors to the church? I might want to say something if I was the pastor then, because if they find out their child's abused, they might up and leave the church. And so I might maybe put a stop to it then. If that child is poor or brown, do I really care if that family's there? Do I really care if they're not giving to the church, whether or not they stay? I might want them to stay so that I can control them, so I know that they're not going to go to the police. But ultimately, if I see that child being groomed, I might just turn the other way and decide that it's not really worth my time to protect that child. And granted, I want you to know that I do understand that the parents have a role to play. But when you go to a UPC church, your pastor runs your life for the most part. And if he's not concerned, then why would anyone else be concerned? After all, he's the voice of God. And so if this person doesn't care, isn't stopping these men from behaving inappropriately, when it's like obvious to anyone with eyes, then why would anyone else in the church step up? Why would anyone else open their mouth? So that is today's video. I would be really interested to hear your opinions on this. As always, you can comment below, or you can email me at survivingchurchandchildhood@gmail.com. Next time, I want to talk about sort of older men fraternizing, associating with, spending too much time with younger women. And that this money part of the conversation flows right into that. So we'll talk about that next time. I hope you guys have a great day, and let's talk soon. Bye.